Hello everyone and welcome into the channel again today. Hope you're having a great day so far. Today's video is going to be focused on the group breakdowns for Stage 1 of the Call of Duty League 2021 season for Black Ops Cold War. After breaking down both groups, we're going to get into a little bit of an opening weekend match preview, kind of give our predictions for those matches. So if you do enjoy the video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more CDL content in the future. But without any further ado, let's get into the video. Now, I want to start off this video by talking about Group A, which consists of the Dallas Empire, the Los Angeles Thieves, Minnesota Rocker, the London Royal Ravens, New York Subliners, and the Seattle Surge. I'm kind of going to go in order of how I think the teams will finish through Stage 1. Not really anything super serious, just a little bit of analysis for each team, and we'll go from there. So, starting off with Dallas, to me, they are the clear favorites in this group, and possibly in the entire Call of Duty League. They seem to get a good draw, all things considered, with this group in Stage 1. All four guys on their roster have the ability to go off on any given map. I mean, we saw Illy in the Kickoff Classic look like an MVP, playing with Shotzi, who was last season's regular season MVP. We all know who can be a beast on the map, and Crim6 is in the conversation for the GOAT of Call of Duty. So all these guys know their roles. They have a comfort as a unit that not a lot of teams will have this year, considering the historic roster mania that we just saw. And it's tough to really predict any team in Group A overtaking Dallas in Stage 1. The team that I kind of see as the second best team in Group A, and that's going to be the Minnesota Rocker. Accuracy might have a chip on his shoulder, all things considered, with the censored beef and drama popping off on Twitter this last week and a half or so. Priesta feels like he's still somehow flying under the radar as one of the best players in the game right now. You have Attach, you have Major Maniac, who are both, in my mind, also very underrated. This team just kind of makes sense on paper. Everything about them, with what Group A is, they feel like the team that I understand the most outside of Dallas. Like, I have the least amount of questions about Rocker. So to me, as it sits right now, comfortably the second best team in Group A, in my opinion. Where it becomes a discussion a little bit, though, is after that. So New York seems to be turning things around in scrims, but there is still kind of a question on how this team will look in actual competition. It also sounds like Hydra might be able to show up at some point during Stage 1, and if not Stage 1, at least early Stage 2, which would be huge. And then it becomes a question of just exactly what this team will do accordingly. Will they drop a seam and just bring Hydra in? So you have Hydra, Diamond, Khan, Mac, and Clayster, like three young guns in Clayster, which is kind of what he wanted coming in, although he was going to have Zuma on his side, which kind of gave him that veteran leadership. Or will they kind of stick with the seam depending on how good the team is looking? I think that's really the big question, is how this team will look when Hydra does, if eventually shows up at all. Because then you can tweak your roster accordingly. But that being said, what they have right now seems to be kind of finally coming into shape, meshing well together. So they're definitely in that argument for, third best team in the group with potential to get up there into the group with Rocker and the second best. And same thing with Thieves, where we see New York improving in scrims. Thieves are kind of going in the opposite direction, where they're kind of falling behind. So it becomes a conversation of what we were talking about in the tier list video, where the puzzle pieces really aren't just fitting well enough with this team. Temp and Kenny are their best players right now. Kenny still shows the potential to be one of the top 5 players in the game at any given point. Temp is, last year he was real volatile. Like, you weren't really sure what you were getting out of Temp. It looks like he's going to be a upper level SMG player at the minimum this year. Slasher is really costing them as just being an average to below average AR at this point, in my opinion. I know he brings that veteran leadership and he makes the call outs, and 4v4 fits him better. But it's just the results aren't there right now for this team. And TJ, just please drop TJ and bring Draza on. I feel like that would fix a lot of the problems this team is experiencing. They just can't keep up with a lot of the teams that are above them when we talk about it. And so I assume that if the first stage is as big of a mess as it looks like it's going to be for Thieves, they will make a change at some point. It's just right now things aren't clicking, and they do have the talent. Like, this team is talented enough. Like, good TJ and good Slasher make this team like a legitimate contender. But as it sits right now, with things not going the way that they want them to go, they do have the talent to turn around. The question is, can they turn it around? Like, we've seen New York start to turn around a little bit, so there is hope. I just have to see it before I can believe it. You know what I mean? So Thieves right now in that conversation with New York, and I'd even throw London into that conversation in Group A, where to me they're the dark horse of this group, especially now that they've brought on Parasite as they wait on Zero to get over to the United States. So Parasite, in my opinion, and I'm sure a lot of people's opinion, fits really, really nicely in this team as a flex. They have Alex and Dylan, and I still really like the upside of Dylan as their subs. Shawnee's the AR. If Parasite meshes well, which is obviously always a concern to have with him, this could be a team that really surprises people. I really like the way this team fits. I liked what I saw from them against Paris in the Kickoff Classic event. And honestly, I think that their ceiling might be higher with Parasite, coming in and meshing well with the personalities on this team than even they would be with Zero. So I'm really interested to see how London looks in there. I think they only play one match in the opening weekend, the FaZe opening weekend. So I'm interested to see how they look. To me, this is a team with a lot of upside in this group. And then Seattle, Seattle's a team that I called the worst team in the league in my preseason tier rankings. And I think that getting placed in this group, which has all these question marks that we've been talking about with New York, with LA, with even London to a certain extent, with Parasite coming in, Seattle's kind of put in a situation where we all assume them to be one of the worst teams in the league, but now they're kind of sitting there like, hey, this group is kind of, after Dallas and Rocker, this group is really kind of up for the taking. Gunless and Octane, all things considered, could be one of the best AR flex duos in the league if they're getting along, which winning early and, taking maps off of good teams, that'll go a long way in helping bridge that trust and build that confidence in this team. And, we know Pristini to be a very hot and cold player. I talked about it in the tier list video, but if things are clicking early on in this group that's filled with question marks, like I mentioned, Seattle could really jump out to being, to a much better start than a lot of people anticipated. So I'm really excited to see how Group A plays out. I think there's a lot of questions here, whereas when you go to the teams in Group B, there's a little bit more like we know what they are at this point. And so I find Group A to be very intriguing, if not for the fact that there's so many question marks that I feel like it's going to be competitive week in and week out. Which now obviously brings us to Group B, transitioning over there, which has the Atlanta FaZe, Chicago Optic, the Florida Mutineers, the Toronto Ultra, the Los Angeles Guerrillas, and the Paris Legion. So for my money, Optic, FaZe, and Florida are three of the four best teams in the league right now, with Rocker kind of knocking on that door. That would be my top five: Dallas, Optic, FaZe, Florida, Rocker, kind of in that order as well. Let's start off with FaZe, who will be hosting this opening weekend tournament here next week. Not even really a tournament. I guess it's just pool play. But FaZe said they got the wake-up call from it really has looked like that in scrims since the kickoff weekend event. Simp almost dropped a nuke on New York, who I mentioned earlier has, by all accounts, started to turn things around in their scrims. People love to root against big brands, and I think you saw that with how people sort of turned on FaZe after the Florida loss. But I just feel like I mentioned in the tier list video, the talent on the FaZe team is just undeniable. If they really learned that they are mortal from that punch in the face, basically, that they got from Florida, it could be exactly what they needed to get them on track. Which brings us to Optic, who's, again, one of those teams where you look at it, the talent makes sense. They're in discussions with Dallas to be one of the best teams in the league. Their roster fit makes complete sense. Everybody knows their role. The guys are playing well together. Dashy is looking like Black Ops 4 Dashy. Formal's looking like Infinite Warfare Formal, which are two of the scariest players in COD history. Scump is always, Scump. And Envoy is likely still the best player on this team, which, all things considered, like, that's insanity. So I really like how Optic, it seems like they're hitting their stride. They're all going to be playing out of the Hex quarters, which we saw as a huge benefit for them Really like this team and how they fit into Group B. Florida becomes interesting, though, because of the cheating accusations flying around their way, especially now with the Neptune and Crimsix drama over Auto Sprint. There was questions, obviously, last year about Awakening and rumors about if they were using the pause glitch during their death cams, basically, to watch where the enemy was on Modern Warfare. All of this has to be said, and then you have to take into account just how nasty Florida has been. I mean, we saw them beat FaZe already. They're a force really to be reckoned with when all of their pieces are clicking. Slacked is that glue guy, like I mentioned, who can kind of do it all. I like how this team fits. I like everything that I've seen from them so far this year. But with all of the controversy, will they be able to weather that storm? I think that's going to be huge, especially in a group that I think is more kind of a gauntlet than we talked about in Group A. And that brings up Paris now, who, like I said with London in the last group, Paris to me is the dark horse of this group. I really like what I saw from them opening weekend, especially from Fire and Aqua. If Aqua can play like that, this team is going to be set up very nicely, because a lot of people were expecting Aqua to be a negative heading into this season. So if he's playing as a positive AR, like a positive role-playing AR, you're getting, hopefully, Scraps returning to form after what we saw in the Kickoff Classic. If Scraps returns to form, they get at least 80% of what we saw out of Agua and Classic, and Fire continues to improve as, one of the top AMs coming into the pro scene this year. This is a team that could really make some waves, and I'm very excited to see how Group B plays out, which, after talking about those top 4 teams, it kind of brings it down a little bit to talk about Toronto, who, to me, if they were in Group A, becomes a little bit more interesting of a team. But in this group, I just don't feel like they'll be as competitive with the top 4 teams. It just feels like those top 4 teams have a little bit too much for them to handle. Whereas I think they could really, like I said, with all the teams kind of finding their footing in Group A, Toronto would fit in nicer there. Same thing with LAG, who we'll talk about now. I like LAG's team more than I like Seattle's, but as it sits right now, being in Group B with as stacked as I think Group B is, I just don't like their chances to build up as much momentum as Seattle might have a chance to. So I'm curious with LAG and with Toronto specifically. I know both of them have talented young guys on their sub bench, with Insight for Toronto and Chino and Mental for LAG. I wonder if things aren't going so well in stage 1 play, maybe we see some roster movement from those teams. Toronto showed last year that they're not afraid to make changes on their roster. So that's what I would look out for with those 2 teams. And all things considered, I definitely think Group B, top to bottom, has stronger teams than Group A. But I think that the storylines maybe from Group A might be a little bit more interesting because of how wide open the middle and, the middle pack of that division feels like it could go. All right, now with the group analysis out of the way, I want to dive into opening weekend by Atlanta FaZe predictions, which I am doing on the Call of Duty League Pick'em website, which it looks like they're going to be giving out some prizes if you get some solid points here. So I'll leave the link down below in the description if you would like to participate as well. But we're going to start off with Thursday's matches, starting off with the LA Thieves at the Minnesota Rocker. I have it 3-1 Minnesota. I think that Thieves' woes will continue, and I believe Minnesota will establish themselves as a legitimate contending team moving forward. Next up, we have the Dallas Empire at the Seattle Surge, which feels like it might be a 3-0 sweep for Dallas in my mind. It's hard to see Seattle being able to take any maps off the reigning champs. Next up on Friday, we have the Optic Chicago versus the Paris Legion. I have Optic winning this one 3-2. I think this is actually a really sneaky fun matchup, all things considered. I think that Paris is going to wake Optic up here with a bit of a close first set, and I think that's good for both teams. Next up, FaZe at LAG. Much like Seattle versus Dallas, I think FaZe kind of takes this one home easy. It's a double-edged sword for LAG. It just doesn't feel like they have what it takes to keep up with FaZe, and they're all playing on the West Coast, so the server situation might get a little dicey for those guys as well. Next up, we have the Saturday matches with LAG versus Paris, which I have Paris taking home 3-2. I think LAG has enough juice to take maps off of any team. Not any team, but off of a lot of teams but maybe not enough to win a series, and I think that's why they end this one 3-2 here. Next up, we have Florida at Toronto. This is both teams' only match of the weekend, so it becomes a question of, does Florida let the outside drama overtake them, or do they come out and handle their business against a team that they should probably win against pretty easily? I'll have Florida 3-2 here over Ultra. And then finally, on Saturday, we have LA Thieves versus the Subliners in a double points promotion by the Call of Duty League. So this is also New York's only match of the weekend. I believe it is, it is Toronto, London, Florida, and New York are only playing one match this weekend, while everyone else is playing two. So I think that Thieves kind of getting that chance to knock off the rust in their first matchup against Rocker. I think they'll bounce back here and take a nice 3-2 win over the Subliners. The Subliners are at a disadvantage in that they're kind of coming into this one cold, whereas Thieves will have obviously that first match experience under their belt, and I think that'll make just a slight difference here. 3-2 Thieves feels like a good match for what seems to be at this point two evenly matched teams. Now we have our Sunday matches, which let me scroll up here so you can see it. Starting off with the London Royal Ravens versus Seattle. Like I said, this will be London's only match of the weekend, but I have them winning this one 3-2. Wouldn't be surprised if you see London kind of shock them here, but like I mentioned earlier, I like Parasite taking on Gunless and Octane in the Toxicity Bowl, as I'm going to call it, but I like the way London fits together a little bit. Think Surge might be feeling a little bit of a struggle bus after maybe possibly getting 3-0'd by Dallas. 3-2 seems like a fair result here. Now let me scroll down so you can see these picks. Empire versus Rocker. One of the series I'm most excited for this weekend. I'm going to go Empire 3, Rocker 2. I think Rocker is going to push Empire to the likes of which they haven't maybe really seen this year, obviously with it being opening week. But I think the Champs are a solid enough team with a lot of experience to where they remain composed and take home a close win. Which brings us to the Game Fuel marquee matchup between FaZe and Optic. In the marquee matchup, I've got Optic taking this one home 3-2. As it sits right now, I see Optic still as a more complete team than FaZe. I'd like to see FaZe kind of come out and show that they're that team that everyone expected them to be heading into the season. But until I see that, I have to roll with what I think are the two best teams in the league, with Dallas and Optic both taking home their marquee matchups by just one game. But I think we're in for a great opening weekend of Call of Duty League 2021. I'm interested to hear what everybody else thinks in the comments below. If you did like the video, please be sure to subscribe. Tell me what you thought about the video overall, and I will be seeing you here shortly. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.